Oh yeah.
Banging opener.
Welcome to the Warrior Strengthcast. Back on the episode today, we have our special guest, John Pappas.
Not so special the second time round.
I am your host, Lauren Green, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host,
Shannon Green.
and the Big Papa back in the house.
What's up, guys?
Thanks for coming.
No worries, no worries. Good time to do a podcast straight after the novice comp we just had here.
Yeah, we just had our first Girl Power Novice Comp, which was a great day. Lots
awesome.
of successful lifts and a lot of people doing their first comp. So, yeah, they killed it.
So if you want to get into the comps, check out our Facebook event page or our website event page. We've got plenty of GPC events and novice events on there.
Yes, check it out.
And also, give us a 5-star rating on iTunes.
Yep.
Like us on YouTube. Follow us on YouTube.
And give us a friendly review.
Yeah.
How could you not?
I promise I'll repost you.
Yeah, good time to do a podcast though, because I think we left off the last one talking about, the benefits of technique and how important that is in the context of powerlifting. And today, seeing the novices that have clearly had a coach for a period of time,
Yep.
and those who maybe don't, seeing the discrepancies in technique, the difference in the numbers, attempt selection, all these things, the benefits of coaching, I think, really shone through today. It was interesting.
Yeah, because definitely, you can see people, they'll miss a lift and they get frustrated when they walked away, they haven't got it, but they missed it on a technicality, they got it up. So, that's the most frustrating thing. If you miss it, you're just not strong enough. You get the shits, but oh well. But, you get it up and then you don't get the lift, it's well...
And they don't understand why they didn't
Yeah.
get the lift and things like that. Yep.
It's just the technical issues again. As we said in the last podcast, powerlifting is a sport.
It is.
But then, as you said, the ones that had the coach, especially the ones their coaches were here with them today as well, and just their technique was really good. I spoke to a couple of people afterwards. I was like, I don't think you should do a novice comp again. You might just need to register with GPC. So there's some
Get
very
involved
very
in
good
it.
lifting. Very
Yeah,
good
the novice
technical.
comp's a good place to start for people just to get involved and just feel out what it's about, and then hopefully that sparks the fire inside them, so they come less of a recreational lifter and start going down that path of actually getting really into powerlifting. So I think it's
Well,
still
that
a great
atmosphere in
idea.
novice comps is always amazing
Yeah, it's
because
awesome.
people are so supportive. I mean, they are general powerlifting comps anyway,
Yeah.
but the novice comps, everyone gets behind everyone, and
Yeah.
because everyone's a bit nervous as well. So, and especially for the first timers, and they all support one another and end up doing some things that they never really thought that was going to be achievable. So, yeah, it's good. I mean, even for some of the lifts, it was giving me goosebumps, and sort of, I wish I could sort of have that much fun. Well, I do. I did at my last comp, but it wasn't like that for me at the beginning. I was a nervous wreck for my first few comps, but just to see everyone do so well, and just I don't know, just see their little sparkles in their eyes when they do something that they never thought they would.
It's pretty cool.
It's like
Yeah.
that. Novice comps are an interesting thing, though. I mean, they're divisive at the moment. Some people are saying, it takes away from powerlifting and makes it look a bit more, recreational and things like that. I have the complete opposite view. I think it's a brilliant way to funnel people into the sport. I started
I
at
agree.
a novice
100%.
comp. I think they're an invaluable asset to the sport. And I think they should be promoted.
It's a low barrier of entry, really. You don't have to invest in a powerlifting onesie singlet, which some people are very self-conscious about.
So many people, I mean, I've still got a few clients, female clients, who are like, oh, I want to do a comp, but I don't want to wear that outfit. And I'm like, well, you don't need to at a novice comp. And I said, but if you do a comp, a sanctioned comp, and you do need to wear it, trust me, when you're about to lift, you don't care what you're wearing. You're not worried about it.
You don't even care from the beginning of the day, and everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah,
Everyone's wearing
But showing
the
up at the
onesie,
gym on that first day in that onesie, I've seen people be really paranoid about it and self-conscious. So.
Yeah.
About novice comps. No, it's good as an intermediate lifter, though, to come back and see how excited people get. It changes your perspective on the sport, and it can kind of reinvigorate you and your passion for the sport as well, because at the higher levels, as we said last week, again, it's a sport. With sport comes competition and sometimes a change in attitude. But just to see people so excited to hit, their 3 attempts or to get an opener and do things that they didn't know they could do, it really gives you an awesome perspective. I think it's something that we should, promote a bit more in powerlifting, and it shouldn't have any negative connotations like some people try and attach to it. So that's just my view. But anyway.
Yeah, you must be hanging out with some negative people. I haven't heard anyone say anything negative about the novice comps.
I think it's one certain federation.
I blank them out. I've got blinkers on. I'm a positive being.
Let's get on to some positive things. So programming, let's go.
Programming.
So last week we were going over GPP technique, what you do before you get into programming.
Yeah.
So we've done that. My GPP's up, my technique's bang on. Where
Is
am I
your
going?
GPP up?
No, it's not. Look at the size of me. It's all relative.
Don't lie on our podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, hypothetically.
I'll be held to this one.
Hypothetically, your GPP's up.
Look, I have actually done a bit more GPP
I know.
work in the last week.
Noticed.
I promise you.
I've noticed.
But anyway, so Shannon, I've done that. I'm working on it anyway. Where do you go?
So
What's the first stage?
I must clarify before we go ahead that I'm not saying that a program is useless unless before you need technique. But you don't really need to pay a coach to program for you. You need to pay a coach to teach you how to train. And you could just do a 5-3-1. You could buy an ebook for $20 and just do that and actually spend the time learning the technique. But if you're going and getting coached by a coach in person, more than likely they're going to write you a program, some sort of structure to follow. But I think people focus too much on the piece of paper. They think the piece of paper is like a magical carpet that's going to deliver them special results. Oh, what program are you doing? The program just, in that sense, doesn't really matter. Programs for each individual coach are going to be slightly different. You can't take another coach's program and implement it the same. It's the same as being a chef or a cook. You can't take the recipe that's written down on paper and recreate the same dish the same way that Rick Stein could, or
Nigella Lawson.
Nigella, any of those famous chefs.
As you'll see if you watch MasterChef, it's not that easy to recreate that.
Yeah, you just can't recreate it. There's an art to it as well. So the way some people program, they program that way because they have a thought process in mind and an execution process in mind. And it's the actual coach that makes the program good and effective with that individual. It's not just the program on paper. You can't just copy down someone's program and implement it and expect the same results as well.
Well, coaching is an art, not a science. I mean, as scientific as you try and base, your principles upon and things like that, it's what's in between the lines, what's in between, the studies and the papers and this and that. That, to me, that's what you pay for. Because as you say, if it's as simple as copying the program, everyone would train the same way, and you'd incrementally get stronger in the same way, and you wouldn't need a coach. But it's that grey area that the coach becomes most important in my view, and that's really what you're paying for.
100%. But also, let's get on to scientific studies. The problem is with some scientific studies too is that you don't know how the person executed the lifts. There's no videos of the lifts. In a lot of studies, they say they try and matched volume on a 3-day program to a 6-day program. I don't know how you match volume. It either going to make the 3-day program way too much volume, or it's going to make the 6-day program way too little volume. So you can't correlate volume for volume between day splits like that within with scientific studies. And also too, it also depends on the execution. That's why I like all the Russian research and all the old school stuff they had, because they were dealing with high level lifters who didn't have any technique flaws and were already trained, so they can actually go and experiment and see what actually manages the fatigue the best. As far as these studies where they're trying to say, 6 days a week is better than 3, and it's no, it's the amount of training within that session that requires a certain amount of recovery that makes it effective. It's not necessarily the amount of days or the amount of total volume in the week does matter, but you can't evenly split. Just for instance, I've helped out in a research paper doing punching power for fighters, and we correlated the bench press to punching power. But when we were going through the process of setting it up, my friend Dr. Luke Del Vecchio, they sent him a program that they wanted him to do, and I said, we're not implementing that program. So it's fucking horrendous.
Yeah, I remember that.
The program, I said, where's the warm-ups? Oh, no, they just jump in and start at that. So we're going to jump in and start at pretty much 70 or 80%. So the warm-up, they run around the room, and then they jump in at 70%. There's like, fuck, does it, what are we studying here? How to fucking
How to
train
injure
shit?
someone?
How to injure someone? Or we're actually, like, we want to study the programming the bench press properly and how it incorporates to going into punching power. So a lot of people I don't see, like, so if you look at like some of the old Russian literature, you've got people who calculate their volume, like Shiko calculates total volume of his programs anything above 50%. Cherniak stipulates anything above 40%. Proliperan's chart denotes weights from 55%, and the Norwegian programs, the Dietmeier or whatever his name is. Sorry, I probably fucked that up. He's calculating volume from 30%. So if you take that into consideration, how can you match all your warm-up sets on a 3-day program to a 6-day program? You're going to have double the amount of volume just in warm-up, just by default, before you even get to your training set. So it's like, I don't see, that's just my 2 cents on research being, I'm not saying research is useless, but it's you got to look at the whole picture. There's obviously a lot of missing parts there, and technique and the individual is going to be a big limiting factor within that.
With the Russian research and that Eastern European stuff, I hear a lot of people talk about the limitations on that research being that it was based in weightlifting and there's no concentric portions to lift, and that even makes it difficult to equate volume and things like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. It is slightly different, but I think it's like probably the most. And if you look and you read a lot of the stuff, a lot of them came to the same conclusions. Like, you get coaches that will become a weightlifting coach for the team for whatever period of years, but they end up coming close to the same conclusions, where they'll have some might go a little bit higher intensity, someone might go a little bit more volume. They're all getting good results working within these sort of set amount of parameters, which I think is important.
Yeah.
And then, it's Olympic lifting, but still lifting weights, you know what I mean? They still squatted, they still deadlift, they still overhead pressed, they still bench pressed in some Olympic lifting programs as well. But they can obviously get away with more volume because it's concentric only, and they can also get away with working at a higher percentage. I think, people will bash Proliperan's chart, but I think it's probably like your best starting point for someone to sort of work within those parameters, and then you got to work with the individual and work out Mike Israel's word, the maximum recoverable volume. But you got to figure out where you're going to break someone, and then where is too little training that they're not going to make any progress. So it's like a bell curve, like you could think of the bottom of the bell curve is 1 set, the other end of the bell curve is 10 sets, and you're going to get your maximum training effect is going to be somewhere between that 5 and 7 sets. Obviously that's going to be different for everyone, but you might find that 5 sets doesn't deliver any more progress than 7 sets. It could just be like that, you know what I mean? Like 2 extra sets sometimes doesn't make a difference, but obviously it just takes time and spending time with a coach. That's why I say it takes me 2 years to figure out how to train someone properly, because I'll experiment with those certain things. I'll try and figure out, if I give them this much volume over this time period, I start giving them this many sets, what happens? And I start to look at injuries, how their movement patterns change. People start going, oh, my shoulder's hurting a bit, or I had to go get more massages this cycle, and then try and figure out, like, is it yielding a better result than the last comp, or is it yielding a worse result? Like, Andrew's probably like the best case study of this, because I've been able to train him for a very long time, and he's let me experiment with a lot of things, and he's consistently done like 2 to 3, 4 comps a year consistently the whole time. So we had, obviously the comp was obviously the tester, so we work him up, and I'd had comps where he did bad, and it was because I just didn't give him enough volume. And I figured out that he doesn't tolerate intensity well. He can't go up above 90% too often, or for too long a period when we're peaking, because he just crashes and burns. He'll end up doing his best lift in the gym, not on the platform. And we also worked out that if I take hypertrophy work away from him, sets of 5 to 8, he actually gets weaker. So even in his peaking of his training cycle, he's doing, on his bench press accessory day, he's doing like incline press for 5 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 8 or something like it. He's working at a fairly high volume to try and keep that hypertrophy base in there, because that's what keeps making him stronger. Every time I try to take that away or go away from that functional hypertrophy sort of range, that sort of 5 to 8 reps for too long, he doesn't get as strong. So we stay in that range and we try and keep it as close. But obviously he needs to also touch heavy weights, because he needs to mentally feel where he's at as well. And I need to see like the speed of it, because I know I can judge how much more he can lift based on his speed, because I've watched him week in, week out for years now. So it's just seeing those things and accumulating them and keeping data, and that's the most important thing. You need to trial these programs out with people and experiment with volume and keep data. And like sometimes some people will work very good with the multiple different programs. Other people will only work good with one sort of program. Like obviously my bias to training, I like a concurrent style system. I use, like, you could say West Side stuff, but I don't see it as like West Side. I mean, Louis popularized all that stuff, but most of the Russian training is a concurrent style. If you look at a lot of stuff Shiko does, he uses bands, he uses pauses in different positions. I like manipulating the different positions of the lift, because it gives that motor pattern a rest a bit too. So it's still like you're almost training specific, but specific enough to progress that lift, but not so specific to like get too much joint degeneration and stuff. Like sometimes people get into conjugate, and the way they go wrong is they change the lifts too much, that they're too far out from the actual competition lift, or too far out from what they need to do to progress. Like I like a large variation in your off season, and then when you get closer, the variations only need to be little. Like you might be changing your hand position by 2 fingers on the bench, or getting a longer pause, or using a slightly different bar but keeping the same grip. Things like that can be enough of a change of stimulus to give you another adaptation and not fry you so much as well. So
yeah.
Well, I know as well, when I think we did speed work with bands, and for me, for the bench, and it didn't have a very good carryover, because he's like, yeah, you've got your bench techniques good enough that you should have this, and it just wasn't consistent enough. It was something for me that we figured out just didn't really give me any gains. So then we took it back to things that we know work, like long pauses on 3-second pauses on the buffalo bar and things like that, and so we just put that back in, and just need to figure it out. But the same with Andrew, like, or with with your clients, like the big win is when the compliance is there, because even regardless if it's the session that he's going to do with you or whatever he's doing outside of the gym, he's not deviating.
And his lifestyle, and that's the other thing about programming. Like you can't really figure out how to program someone if their lifestyle is, if they're fucking their lifestyle up, which is not making the program variables control for you. He pretty much goes to work, he eats like a fucking champion.
I mean,
he actually doesn't sleep that much.
He doesn't sleep that
because
much.
He works at the market, so he gets like 6 hours will be a good night during the week. You know what I mean? Usually it's 5 hours. So for him to get that strong on that little sleep, I think is a fucking big achievement. And I think that's just a lot of what we've got around manipulating in the variables in the program, so he could get stronger. You know what I mean? With that little sleep.
And just trusting in you that he knows that what's on the program, like even if it feels like it doesn't feel like it's enough, he knows he's not going to do any more or less.
Trust is massive. It's a massive thing. But
you got to keep that lifestyle consistent though. Like if you're going out sinking piss on the weekend or
just staying out to 5 a.m,
and doing stuff like that, missing sleep when you've got big training sessions, or your diet's all over the place, your hydration sucks, your sleep sucks, all of that's going to affect the program. You don't know if it was actually the program was terrible, or was the fact that everything externally you did just did not give that program a chance to work and do its stuff. So that's probably the biggest factor as well. You need obviously people that are compliant and just start to live more of a regimented sort of lifestyle. And again, like if you're just a recreational lifter, most of this stuff's not going to matter if you don't really want to get stronger. You'll get to a certain point, but you're just not going to get any further. But if you're serious, you need to take a lot of this stuff into consideration. Like with Lauren, like the beauty of her is like, obviously I live with her and I get to call her up on a diet and stuff like that when she's
I'm always strict with my diet. I'm in a gain phase. Doesn't mean
make her sleep more. Like there was a point there where she was working too much, and I said you've got to ditch your morning clients because you're just not getting enough sleep. So things like that, like adding a bit extra to her sleep, and she does really well with 8 or 9 hours sleep. But she'll do a training session, and then at night or in the afternoon she'll be sitting there and she'll re-watch all her training videos, and she'll go, where did I go wrong, where did I fuck up? And then every session she comes back and she's better because she keeps reviewing her training. So many people just do their training videos, send them to me, and they don't even sit there and analyze where they've gone wrong. She tries to analyze it first, and this, what do you reckon about this, or what should I do here, and then the next session she implements it and she gets better. I mean, she hasn't put like over 200 kilos on her total in 2 years for just no reason. It's because she's diligent with her food, she's diligent with her sleep, and obviously we've figured out the right amount of training, and then she's also just reviewing her training and getting better at it.
Knowing when I move like my legs out a centimetre on my deadlift or my hands, like, half an inch or whatever. And I write the notes in my diary as well. There's notes on everything that I've done. Yeah. I don't think anyone else would be able to read the notes in my diary. but I kind of know. I kind of know what they say. Yeah. When I've had a good day because I write some woo, and when I'm like, that was shit.
But if we strip it all back and we read between the lines, what I think comes to the fore here is intent. Yeah. Whether it's intent on every repetition, whether it's intent with your diet, whether it's intent with your lifestyle, or even the analysis of your training. Yeah. You're not just filming it to go through the motions and tick the box out. I've sent the video to my coach. Yeah. I'm going to get stronger now. Yeah. The intent is to analyze it and get better.
Yeah,
and I
100%.
think we need to go into training like that. Everything we do has an intent, whether it's for better or for worse. We need to know what we're trying to achieve, and does this help us get there?
Yeah, I'll film a set, and then while I'm resting my 3 to 5 minutes, whatever it is, I'll watch that video over. Go, okay, did I, and I'll watch say I'm doing bench 3 reps, and I keep watching it over, and then I'm like, okay, I'll watch my feet now. Did I use leg drive? Was I steady in the pause? Was the bar still, or was it there's so many things you can watch. You don't just record it and just have a look at it. And just watch bar speed. You know, I might watch my video 4 times and then I go, I haven't even checked the bar speed. Then I'll go and watch it again. Okay. Yeah. So there's so many things to look at, and it's not just always filming just for Insta likes. Yeah,
but obviously that's your biggest factor in figuring out where your program's at. You got to control those other variables first. That's why I was saying technique is such a massive thing in programming. It's not necessarily the program. The technique needs to be there so you get the benefit out of the program. So a program essentially is that, as we say the other day, is like a roadmap. Essentially, if you've got a roadmap but you don't know how to drive a car, where are you going to go? You need some. It's to give you direction, but you've got to have to be able to do something with that direction.
Getting back to something you were saying earlier though about Philippin, and we were talking about guys like Mike Israetel and the Norwegian study. I'm a massive fan of Mike's work, and I think if we look at Philippin's chart, for example, you've got your optimal reps and a range, okay? Yeah. And if we take what Mike says, he talks about recoverable volumes, adaptive volumes, and things like this. We sometimes get lost in the semantics. I think, again, if we strip that back, what we're really looking at, and what you were touching on earlier, is the fact that the program is only as good as the athlete, and the athlete's only as good as the program. And I say that, what I mean when I say that is, you need to look and see, track your trends in your training. I mean, after a recent competition, I was having a discussion with you, and you were saying for one of your clients, you noticed that the volume in his incline bench pressing went down, and his shoulder work had gone down, and his upper back work had gone down, but the main work had gone up, but he was in a net worse position. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You only get that from analysing the data, looking at your adaptive volumes and recoverable volumes in not just one lift, but the whole program. And I think that's something that's so important, and you can only really work on if you track all the metrics like you're talking about. Yeah,
and that's obviously like you're experimenting with stuff, and I think you should also try and experiment, because you need to find things that work better. And then sometimes you just change things and you won't pay attention to what you're changing, and then if you're not keeping that data, how do you know where you went wrong? That's why like people go, oh no, I don't write a training diary, I just do my program. It's like,
I just write a number on there.
No one ever gets through a whole program. Like, even maybe your warm-up sets change, you know what I mean? Like, maybe you're doing sets of 20 in your warm-ups or something like that. Like, no one goes through a year of programming and just does exactly the program. It's not a reality. I've never really seen it. So people need to keep training diaries and keep keep some notes on that sort of stuff, so that the coach or yourself can look back. Like, I've got training diaries going back like 10, 15 years, and I've sat down and analysed them and figured out how many total reps I did in that training cycle, what was the average intensity, how many days did I train per week. Like, one of the biggest trends I saw when I would correlate my training days per week on myself is that every time I'd crash and burn in a training cycle, I'd add up the average days over that training cycle, and it always come to 3.3 to 3.6 training days
per week. That is
per week.
Yeah.
So like, that's just forcing me to take weeks off and stuff like that. So I went, well, why don't I just train 3 days a week, and then that's just going to keep me just below that threshold. Obviously there's other volume and intensity factors that may come into play, but just by changing that variable, I was able to train, like, take less time off training. So then my total training sessions over the year essentially became more, because I wasn't getting sick for 2 or 3 weeks at a time with a flu or chest infection or some shit like that. There was actually then, because I was training 4 or 5 days a week, but then I was having to get a chest infection and I wouldn't train for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
So then...
And then 2 weeks rebuilding, and
and then another 2 weeks rebuilding. So then you got really 4 to 5 weeks that are really wasted training. It's like, well, why don't I just not get sick and then not waste that 4 to 5 weeks? And then over the years, that accumulation is going to equal better amount of training as well. So it's another, obviously, variable that you need to consider.
So speaking of metrics and things like that, what does Shannon Green's training diary look like? What types of things are you keeping track of, and are you writing down?
All my warm-up sets. Like, I do like a warm-up, like a activation type circuit with different stuff depending on what I'm working on at the time. It's more sort of stability based stuff, or anything that's rehab an injury, or any mobility based thing that I need in there. So I track that, and then I track all the training I do from the empty bar. I don't just throw a plate on and start. I start with the empty bar, make sure everything feels right, get some blood in there, and then start working up, and obviously tracking my training, tracking my accessory work, the weights I did, the reps, all that sort of stuff, my body weight each time, how many hours I slept, check my blood pressure all the time. Like, people might think tracking blood pressure is a funny thing, but you got all like tracking systems out there, like the HRV, Morpheus, stuff like that. I used HRV when it first came out, the Bioforce one. I used it for a while, and what I found is it was already too late. By the time I was in the gutter, I already knew I was.
By the time it
told me I was in the gutter, I already knew I was in the gutter. You know what I mean? It wasn't like an early warning sign.
Sorry, just taking a step back, HRV, heart rate variability.
Yeah.
How does that differ from a heart rate itself?
I don't know the exact things of it, but it takes your average heart rate over the, was it 2.5 minutes, I think they use, and it basically gives you a score, because you've got to have a certain amount of fluctuations and spaces between those heartbeats, and it looks at the variability within that heart rate and then gives you a score based on that. So the Russians used it. It's been around for a very long time, so it's got a lot of evidence behind it. But I found it's hard. But also too, these apps and like putting the chest strap on in the morning, all this shit, I found was a high barrier of entry for people.
Yeah.
You could be paying like $300 by the time you get an app and a polar chest strap and all this sort of shit, where you can go to like Chemist Warehouse or anything like that. You can get a blood pressure monitor for $100, or find one on eBay for $50 or $80, or you get a decent blood pressure monitor, and you just lie in bed, you stick it on, and you fucking hit the button, and you do that a couple of times each morning, and it's done.
Yeah.
And it's such a low barrier of entry for people, so that's why I track it, because it's easy for people to do, and I'm more likely to get someone to do it. But you'll also see, if I'm going through a heavy training cycle and I'm starting to get really overreached, my blood pressure will start spiking more than it usually did, and so will my resting heart rate. So I'll see those things starting to trend up, and I'll know. And then like sometimes that doesn't matter, because when you get into the middle of a training or deep in like a peaking cycle, you want to feel shit. You need to feel horrendous. Like that's part and parcel. You need to create some fatigue, so that when you taper, you're actually taking fatigue away, and then you super compensate. So there does need to be something, but it also too, I find that it makes people, a lot of powerlifters use powerlifting as an excuse to be unhealthy and overweight and fat. Like, it's just...
I've been there. It's easy to do.
Yeah, but if they're tracking their blood pressure and their resting heart rate, it's showing them every morning how bad a shape they're in. You know what I mean? So I find it gets people to stay in better shape, and then over time it gives me some sort of metrics, and I'm like, well, in this training cycle they just like it got really high, but they didn't really yield much more results than this one. So then maybe that volume was a little bit too much. Let's pull it back and see what happens the next time. And obviously just like if you're tracking something and you pull it back once and it makes progress, doesn't necessarily mean that's the way to go. You've got to start to do these things 2 or 3 times. That's why it takes so long to figure out that was actually it wasn't just a coincidence, or you just had a little bit more fatigue floating around than usual. You got to start seeing repetitive patterns within the training process as well.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on as well, and you just brought it up there, was warm-ups. The warm-ups that you've been running into your programs recently seem to be similar to the things that Matt Wenning and people like that are espousing, talking about the stability and high reps in the warm-ups, but things that are relative to the lift you're doing that day. And that's something that I've been implementing in my training recently, and to me it makes a massive difference in how I feel, even getting under an empty bar, you know, because I sit at a desk all day. If I sit down, if I get under the bar after sitting all day, I feel stiff, I feel this, I feel that. I think this training cycle I'm doing prowler pushes and kettlebell swings and things like that. Can you just touch on how you program a warm-up? What types of things are you doing? Give me maybe an example for a squat workout, for example.
So generally, like I said, like try and think of it like this. When I get people in the first training session, like if like we're going right back to the basic beginner away from the powerlifter, their first training session they might be doing a lot of stuff like planks and side planks and single arm kettlebell walks and leg curls and all that type of shit. So that might be their main workout. Eventually that main workout then becomes their accessory work, and then that accessory work then eventually becomes their warm-up. Does that make sense? So they build some sort of conditioning, so it's got like a full circle that comes back. So in the beginning that might be hard for them, so like I'm not going to give them an exercise in their warm-up that's going to be too hard and it's going to take away from the main lift, but I want to put an exercise in there that's going to either it's going to be a weakness for them, or an underlying, like maybe they've got weak triceps or weak lats or something like that, could say. So I'll have extra of that work in there, just a little bit, because that total volume, even though it's low and it's below like 30-40% or whatever, that still adds up all the time. People probably just don't respect the fact that if you just came to the gym and just did like 20 tricep press down to the lightweight, 20 lat pull downs, and another guy didn't do anything, who's going to be stronger in 6 months?
Yeah.
The guy going to the gym doing a little bit, that little bit will add up and will create something, you know what I mean? So if I'm adding that little bit to my training program, but it's not affecting the actual whole, at the end of the day, I'm sneaking extra volume into myself as well.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm getting myself more ready for that workout. So, obviously, it depends on the individual, and I'll individualize it, and I'll look at what's weak. Do they have a real weak core? Are they unstable in the hips? So I take a lot of stuff from Jordan Shallow's sort of stuff, a lot of Stuart McGill sort of stuff, and then a few of the things that Matt Wenning does as well, just accumulating some extra volume. Sometimes I'll make those warm-ups in the off season or in like the base building phase a little bit harder, so then they're actually going into that base building workout under a little bit of fatigue. So it just makes them sort of work harder in that sense.
And that progression you're talking about, going from warm-up to going from session to accessory to warm-up, I think then the warm-up serves two purposes. One, obviously it warms you up, hence the name, but two, you can then assess a tightness or an imbalance, because if you've been doing those exercises or something similar for a period of time, a single arm kettlebell walk is an example. I can see if I'm walking now, usually if I've got a mirror there somewhere, I can see one trap sitting higher, maybe my shoulders are a bit tight, and having the bench meet the other week, we saw an injury that is probably related to just having that tight shoulder, and something so subtle. These warm-ups give you that form of prehab and preventative, it's a preventative measure as well, that can save you from getting injured. So it's funny how something that's so simple and you could overlook so easily could actually prevent you, in the long way around, but could prevent an injury down the track.
So, I mean, like we spoke about it on the injury podcast about doing your planks properly and stuff like that, and people will go, but planks, you know what I mean? Like, how's a plank gonna get you ready for a 300 kilo squat and all this sort of, it's like some people think it's too far detached from the barbell, but my theory is if you can't, it's like what can't you do? That's a stone that's unturned, it's just a weakness. So if you can't do a fucking plank, but you can squat like 250 kilos, that's a discrepancy within your training. You should be able to do a plank with someone almost standing on your back. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Because that just means that's a weakness. You need to get good at the basic, just like you need to get good at the basic lifts before you start to add things into them. You need to be good at the basic sort of stability core work and then build that up the chain. So that's what we do. We start it in their workout, and then they get better at it, so then it becomes accessory work, then they can become good at that, and it's not creating too much fatigue, so then we can put it before, and then the other stuff that comes in front and like behind that is more complex. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right, so trying to bring it back to what we were talking about at the start of the podcast, which was, we've done what we said in episode 1. We've got the GPP built up and things like that. If I'm Shannon Green, I'm sitting down to write a program, how do I start? What types of things am I doing? Where am I going?
So ultimately, I'll try and have a look at, like, I try and ask people what they've done previously. This is where it all comes full circle, where you need to have done some stuff to write a specific program. You know what I mean? So you need to have experimented with some stuff. If I'm taking them from a beginner, I'm already experimenting with that stuff as a beginner. So then once I get into the phases where I start to actually get them more of a legit program, I already sort of know where they're going because I've already worked with them from stage 1. But if they're coming into me as a late stage novice or an early stage intermediate, I'll ask them a series of questions. Again, what's their 5RM, this, that, what programs have they used in the past, how many days per week have they trained. I'll go to their social media and I want to have a look at how they execute the exercises. So I'll go on and have a look at their training videos. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people will post the workouts they do each week. Some people only post their PRs. It's better if you post your workouts each week. Then we can see the difference from workout to workout and what your sort of bottom is and your top, and how often you fall apart. So I'll just go back and I'll look through that and start to look at weaknesses, and then if I have the luxury of bringing them in and going through a session with them, then it just makes the process a lot easier because I can see what's happening straight up front, and I can get in like the real world situation and put them in positions, make sure it's not like a hip restriction or anything like that, see if it's just a cueing issue, fix all those things first, and then go, okay, what are the other weaknesses? We work them up and see where they break down and go, okay, let's stick this exercise in and see what happens. And then it's just like a recipe. I add stuff in, that didn't taste too good, let's pull it out, let's put this in instead, you know what I mean? So we start to add exercises in and figure out what exercises are going to work the best for them for that point in time, and then what exercise fix that problem initially. You may not need that exercise. It might just be a fly on the wall type thing. You might use it for a little bit and then get rid of it. Some people, we might just keep it in because every time we take it away, they just go to shit. So we're just experimenting with little things like that as well. And so, basically it's looking more at the individual and figuring out where they are at, and then figure out where they break down, and then figure out what training they've done before. And then I sort of ask them questions about their sleep, their lifestyle, and try and figure out the volume that they're doing, and then their outcomes or their training outcomes, like how much effort are you putting in and what's the output, what are you getting out of it. Like Joanne Gregan was a perfect example. Like Joanne was she's a fucking workhorse, man. She's such a machine. Like she'll drive herself in the ground. It's just one of the toughest women I've ever trained, man. Like but she can tolerate a fair bit of volume. But she was doing more than she was actually benefiting from. Like, she was putting in that much effort, but getting 5 kilos on her total. And it was like, I'm like, looking at her training, and technically she was beautiful, like perfect technique, and I'm just like, you're doing too much. You can't, like, there's nowhere you could even go with more training, you know what I mean? The amount of volume you're doing is tapped out, but it's just not benefiting you. And we just pulled it back enough, started experimenting with stuff within the training cycle. I started low, which gave a bit of a buffer to get rid of any residual fatigue, and then I started to bring it back up in the training cycle. And And she did pretty well. I mean, she put 25 or 30 kilos on her total at that level, which was in 14 weeks.
And she didn't really have the best day on the platform either.
It was, for her, probably wasn't the greatest day. I definitely think there was another 10 kilos in her, per se, maybe even more. But it was what it was, you know what I mean? It was just...
But that gain at that level is massive as well.
Yeah,
we're not talking, 50 kilos on your 12 weeks on your muscle, magazine type thing. It's at that level, that level of gain is a massive increase. She's almost a masters athlete, like a late sub-masters athlete, and she's
a single mum. She owns a business,
single mum with 3 kids.
She's got 3 kids. Sorry, Dave. You know what I mean.
There's a lot, she's got a lot going on. You know what I mean. So, and then I was like, you could probably maybe do that much if you were like 20 years old and you worked 9 to 5 and you went down on the week, you went home on the weekends, you had nothing else. She probably would have progressed from it, but because of the rest of her lifestyle, it was just too much. So it's just looking at those metrics. Like, probably one of the biggest things is, I don't know if we've spoken about it before, but there's a guy I used to work with, a trainer, and he came to me and he'd been training with a guru coach, and he wasn't getting anywhere anyway. He was frustrated, been training for 6 months, doing all the supplements the guy told him to take, eating. I knew the guy was diligent. He wasn't going to waste. He's not the type of guy that wastes his money. Whatever they said, they say jump, he'd say how high. I said, well, walk me through the training process. What happened? Walk me through the stages. So the first 6-week program, he trained 4 days a week. And the guy wrote pretty decently well-structured programs. Guy gained 1 kilo of body weight. Excuse me. Then the next, whatever it was, 6 or 8 weeks, he went to 5 days training. He gained 0.5 kilo of body weight. The next sort of 10 or 12 weeks of training was twice a day, 6 days a week. So he's splitting his sessions, and his body weight stayed the same. And I'm like, he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, the guy reckons I'm not doing the diet and this. And he goes, I'm doing everything. I said, it's right in front of you, man. Like, I can tell you right now, going from 4 days to 5 days and getting less progress, that wasn't a good move. I would have pulled it back there. Like I said, you made all right progress on 4 days a week. But I said, the amount of effort you're putting in the gym, I said, that I don't even think that's a good outcome. So I said, like, you went from 4 days a week and gained 1 kilo to 5 days a week, gained 0.5 kilo, went to twice a day, 6 days a week and gained nothing. I said, where were you going to go from there? Like, up, you did train 3 days, 7 days a week, you would have lost weight. Do you know what I mean? I said, so let's go back, let's train 3 days a week. So I pulled him back to a 3 day a week, sort of whole body style, more like whole body style program. Within 3 months, he gained 8 kilos. Like, obviously there's something to be said with like satellite cell increasing with training at high frequencies and high volume and stuff like that. That didn't develop the 8 kilos though, but maybe some of that higher overreaching training maybe helped develop some of that. But the fact was that it needed to work within a structured process. Once he started not making the same progress as the program before, the guy should have said, well, that's too much, let's pull it back and go here again, or let's do a structured overreaching phase, then drop it down to a lower volume or frequency, and then let's run that for a little bit and see how we go and desensitize from the high volume, high frequency training, and then go back up. Like, you can't just hit these things all in one training session. Like, it's, people will say, oh yeah, I want to get my squat up, so I'm going to do Smolov or a Shiko program. It's like, motherfucker, like, you can't. The Shiko's programs are written for a specific athlete. If you come to him as and he was coaching you, the program you get would be completely different. He'd start out, he'd look at you, and he'd implement and bring that volume up slowly. Like when I did his seminar back in 2013, he said you need to start with the book, and if you've ever read the original book, basically they start with a bar or 40 kilos or something like that, and they're doing like box squats, and then the second day, and then they slowly just linearly work it up for like anywhere to 12 weeks, and they progress the people into being able to tolerate that volume and frequency. But you got to remember, like, you're getting Russian athletes that have been within a school system that's like Their
Trained all their
GPP,
life.
it's crazy. You know what I mean? They're athletes. They're not like some desk jockey coming off the street. So you want to go in and go, oh, I want to get my squat up, so I'm going to train 4 days a week. How many days you been training? Oh, I've just been squatting once a week. Motherfucker, squat. Just fucking
Twice a
squat
week.
twice a week, you know what I mean? Add a second squat session in after your deadlift session that's light. And then once you get accustomed to that and you can tolerate that, then maybe add a third session in that's even lighter. So you got a normal squat session and then a medium session and then a light session. And then eventually you build it up. You just don't go from squatting once a week into squatting 4 times a week. It's like the fucking dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, this doesn't make sense, you know what I mean? It's like when newbies come to you and they're like, oh, I'll fucking do anything. I'll fucking train 6 days a week. I'll do the whatever diet you want. It's like, man, you're going to last 2 seconds. You won't survive. Come in, train twice a week, build that up, fucking max out the twice a week. Start changing your breakfast or cut out some fucking soft drinks, get good at that, and then layer something in. The powerlifting training is no different. You don't just fucking throw everything at, like that machine gun approach. Try and fucking blast everything.
Well, it's funny, the Chico seminar you were talking about, someone asked the question, apparently, what do you think of number whatever program?
That was me.
Yeah. And he goes, oh, there you go. You must have been you telling me the story. And he goes, what are you talking about, number this? He had no idea. He was saying there, as you said, they are programs written for a specific athlete that someone has taken and just ascribed a number to arbitrarily. There's no progression of numbers.
Dave Bates, which was... who's the guy? He used to run that Raw Unity meet.
I know who you mean. He was working with Chico. He did a PowerPoint presentation.
Well, he's anyway. Dave Bates was his coach, and him and Dave Bates got the programs from Chico, and instead of like releasing athletes' names, they just labelled them 1 to 100.
Right.
And then so 29 was apparently a guy who had a weak deadlift, and then 37 was a peaking block or something like that for a certain lifter. So they were all certain programs programmed in a certain way for a certain lifter. Like if you take Chico programs and actually get into crux of it and actually look at the total volume, you can see certain phases are targeted towards the bench press, certain phases are targeted towards the squat, some are targeted towards the deadlift. He doesn't try and like target everything within the one sort of basically program. You'll have more the deadlift focus, so they might have a higher volume or higher percentage dedicated to the deadlift, and then other ones there's a higher percentage dedicated to the squat.
Yeah, and I think that you see the limitations of relying exclusively on an internet program, you know what I mean? Because you might not know that, because reading the forums, I would have understood that, this is a linear approach to training insofar as this number follows this number.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, something like that, you know what I mean? And you need that coach to sit down and really analyse the numbers and see, hold on a minute, where are we going with this?
Yeah.
And you'll quickly realise that that's not how even Chico himself structures trainings, structures his training for advanced athletes, let alone how you should be training at your level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, in the seminar he said, if you want to change from 3 days a week training to 4 days a week training, it's usually a committee that decides whether you're going to train. They'll have a look at your work and your life schedule. They'll have a look at the numbers and the volume you've been hitting and progressing within those 3 training days. And then if they think it's exceeding enough that you can go to 4 days and that you will benefit, then they'll put you on a 4-day program. You don't just decide that I like training 4 days. It's the results that they determine that are actually going to, if it is then going to benefit you or if it's going to hinder you, and then they might put you on that and find that you go nowhere, so then they'll pull it away. But generally, like, even if you're like a masters of competition, CMS or whatever it is, like
candidate for master of sport, I think it is,
generally, like the Russian system, when they get into the full blown, is training, is it 7 sessions, 8 sessions a week or something. It's like Monday is 2 sessions, Tuesday is 1 session plus 3 hours of massage and sauna, and then Wednesday is 2 sessions, Thursday is 2 hours of massage and sauna, then Friday is 1 session, Friday is 2 sessions, Saturday is 1 session, 3 hours of massage and sauna, and then Sunday off or something. But generally those guys don't have any work.
Yeah.
That's their job.
Yeah.
So, I don't understand, like, one of the dumbest things I ever heard one guy say is like, oh yeah, I like to train a lot. He goes, so I did a 5-day Shico program, so Master of Sport candidate. And then I added bodybuilding training in as accessory work, and then and he's like, oh, I need to train that much to get stronger, but your results don't say that. You squat less than a 60-kilo girl. You know what I mean? Like, well, it's true. Like, he squats less than someone who's a 60-kilo female powerlifter, and you're a male. Like, you can just indicating that you've been training long enough that whatever you're doing with your training is not working for you. You training a lot, you don't need to train a lot. The reason you're not progressing is not because it's hard for you to progress. Yeah. It's because you picked the wrong training style or the amount of training for you. It's not how much you can do. It's how much you can recover from.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And some people are just very resilient and can cop a lot of shit. And I used to do that to myself. I could bury myself into the ground. It comes from martial arts. Like, sometimes that's a gift in martial arts. You need to be able to, when you get deep in those rounds and you're getting fucked up, you need to be able to be resilient and just dig deep and just keep pushing through. That does not work in powerlifting training.
Yeah, and I think that, well, it's true. And that line that you used is something that people, I think, hear a lot, but have to be really ready to take on because it's so important. As you say, you can arbitrarily keep doing reps, but if you're not recovering, you're not progressing. You know what I mean? And that's something I've been hearing for years, but it's only recently that I've been able to appreciate, let's call it the wisdom in that statement and how important that really is.
Yep.
But anyway, going back to, let's take your training now. You were talking about a concurrent program earlier, and I don't like to label things because we talk about concurrent, then you're talking about conjugate, and we're talking about Westside. To me, they're three similar but distinct programs. Westside is one iteration of a conjugate, let's call it conjugate concurrent program. Even they have their subtle differences. So without putting labels on things, what's a basic training breakdown for you? If you're writing that program we talked about earlier, you've gone through that initial stages.
So
how many
concurrent
times
just means you're training all the variables at once. Like Charlie Francis's thing was a concurrent system, and it's basically everything's getting trained. It's kept in there. You're just not taking it away. Sometimes with a block periodization type cycle, which means you're sticking to one sort of phase. Let's say just hypertrophy with a pure block periodization. That block everything would be hypertrophy parameters, and then the next block would either be that or a functional strength block, which would be sort of 4 to 6 range, and then you'd go into like a power block and then a peaking block. Sometimes for some individuals, taking away a certain stimulus, like Andrew would take the hypertrophy stimulus away, he loses strength. So sometimes just a pure block system is not the best system for someone. So a concurrent system means everything's in there. It just might not be in there to a full degree. So while the block might still be a peaking block and strength focused with the main work, we might be keeping certain other things in there. So like, if just by me putting the warm-up within a block system, it doesn't really become pure block training then. It just ends up becoming concurrent because I'm still training a certain parameter or a stimulus within a parameter of another block. So that's why the conjugate thing, people just automatically think of Westside, and Westside is not Westside unless you're at Westside. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can't do it. Louis is a coach and he's going to coach you the best way. It's his recipe. Do you know what I mean? Just like Matt Moran or any of those chefs, it's their recipe, and it's like the way they like to cook a steak. There's going to be, you go to fucking 10 different chefs and they're going to all cook a steak a different way, slightly, but it's all going to taste completely different. So the program is not going to be not much different to that. It's the way the coach, as I said, the coach implements it. So what
types of things are we talking about? Sorry, when you talk about you're keeping everything in there, what types of things are you talking about? So like I always train speed in there, but I'm not doing a speed session. I'm just getting people on their lighter days to move weights fast, or sometimes I'll be getting them to move them slow. Do you know what I mean? So there might be a hypertrophy or a time under tension stimulus in that block. The accessory work is generally most of the time going to be hypertrophy based. But I'll also still stay within a block system, so I'll still have dedicated blocks. This block is a base block. So although I might be using, like, sometimes I might use like 3 to 6 reps in that base block, it's made up through more volume in that block where I'll add more sets, or I might do an exercise and then add a second exercise to it.
I mean, I guess it's sort of hard to someone to visualize, but like, for instance, let's say I might do 3-second pause dumbbell presses for 4 sets of 6 or something, and then I might add in like some shoulder press for 3 sets of 5, but I got the requisite amount of reps. Instead of doing 5 sets of 8, I did like 6 or 7 sets, but just different exercises to target roughly the same areas, but still building some hypertrophy in those muscles because of the total metabolite accumulation of that workout. I like to do in the base phases with people's bench press and squats, do like a wave loading type thing where we go up. You've experienced it, where you might go 5 reps on the first set, then you go 3 reps on the second set, then 7 or 8 reps or 9 reps or 10 reps sometimes on that other set. So what it is the fact is we're doing like 6 or 7 sets, but I'm only working hard in 3 of those sets. So the mental, it doesn't take as much mentally to get through the session. I still accumulate the right amount of volume, but sometimes you look at something and you think, fuck, I've got to do another 3 sets of 6, you know what I mean? Where you get a set of 3 where I get the speed of, like, powerlifting's about 1 rep, so that first rep is the most important rep generally, but a lot of the time I'm getting a lot more first reps. I'm doing another set which then becomes active recovery, but I'm still training a speed component to that set, and then I've got a set where the person's got to dig deep, but then mentally the next set they're not destroyed, do you know what I mean? So I find they get a lot more out of those sets than straight sets. Like, it's just a trick mentally. Like, sometimes I add chains or bands to a bar, not for any other reason, but to trick them mentally into handling more weight, but without the same amount of fatigue associated with that session. So I can add, like, let's say the chains are 25 kilos at the top, that can be 10, another 10-15% for someone. So although they're working at 70% mentally, I think that's fucking easy, but they're unracking and holding and stabilizing 85%, but they're not getting the same fatigue associated with that session as well. Where then other times I like to do things under fatigue, like with the deadlifts, I'll get people to do a bunch of speed pulls or partial deadlifts or something like that, and then go and pull off blocks heavy, or go and pull off the floor heavy, or pull with chains heavy, and it's that eventually, like within the training block, they'll get up to a weight and they're like, fuck, I've done this weight before but it was hard. But you just did a weight you've done for a triple, for multiple sets of triples, after you've just done fucking 10 or 15 other deadlift sets before, you know what I mean? So then you are stronger, because if you did that before, there's no way you would have even hit that top set. So that's just a way for me to gauge that they're stronger, do you know what I mean? And then we pull them back, and then we do a full deadlift session where they're just deadlifting, and then the speed is like, and then the confidence just builds. They're like, wow. So it's all like a mental game within the program as well. Like, sometimes I want to crush you mentally, sometimes I want to build you up mentally as well. So that's obviously structured within the training program as well. But getting back to it is like a concurrent, like every program is linear. If it's not, you're not going to progress. So while my program is a concurrent, every 2 weeks, roughly, certain things jump up, whether the volume, or every week the volume. We'll have, essentially, I'm working on more, you could say it almost looks like Brandon Lilly's cube method, but it's just the traditional old high, medium, low training session. So you might, if you're 4 days or 5 days a week, you might have a heavy training session, a light session, 2 mediums. The next week you might have 2 heavy, 2 low, and then you might have 3 mediums, 1 light. It just depends. I try and work it out so that the fatigue of that block, we're structurally overreaching in some weeks, whether some weeks will be high stress, and then other weeks will be slightly lower stress. But those lower stress weeks doesn't mean they're not hard. They're just not, they're lower stress either volume wise or lower stress intensity wise, but I make the session hard by then adding a longer pause on the bench press, or something like that, or slowing down the tempo, or they might have a whole bunch, then that session might be light, but then I'll give more accessory work on that day.
Yeah.
So while the heavier day I had to cut the accessory work down because they were just overreached and there's no point in them doing a fuckload of accessory work after that. Cut it down, they walk out of that session going, fuck, I'm glad I didn't have to do all that accessory work. Then on a lighter day they might catch that accessory work up.
Yeah.
So it's just about like structuring in the fatigue, so they're not completely wrecked every session. Some sessions and some weeks they're going to be wrecked, and other sessions and other weeks it's going to be easy. Like sometimes I get people do a program and they go, oh, the first week was easy, so I'll put the weight up. It's like, it's fucking easy for a reason, motherfucker. Like if there's an easy session, there's a fucking hard session coming very soon, you know what I mean? Like enjoy those light sessions, but like in saying that, like the speed work is, again, we just work it within the training. We want to move certain things faster, and I want to move certain things slow. I want to add pauses in. But just doing a normal deadlift and then doing a pause deadlift, that really becomes like conjugated. I've just changed the exercise because I've slowed down the velocity of the bar in a certain point. It's changed the stimulus of the exercise.
It changes my enjoyment of deadlifts.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact.
It makes your deadlift go up though.
It hurt. Well, you know, when I PB my deadlift, I'll thank you for it, but right now I hate you for it.
So everything within my programming is linear, and it's still concurrent to a degree, even if I've got someone like some people, they can't have such bigger changes, and some people mentally just need to see it accumulate slowly over the week. So you still got to work within that individual, and I think it's sort of like, I really think it's a half and half, like changing like what I've got Lauren on and what you've used before. You can't always give that to everyone. Some people just need to be, and especially like lesser qualified lifters, just need to be more just structured and just stick with it, and then the next week just go up. So a more structured block system. But then within that, obviously I've got like warm-ups and other stuff, and then maybe we've got some plyometrics in there sometimes depending on what they need. And
that's the benefit of the concurrent system. There's always something you can pull on and change and alter depending on how the person's responding. And I think there's a lot to be said for that mental aspect that you spoke about before, because when you're doing those linear programs, it's sometimes hard to rebuild momentum once it's been lost.
Yes.
If I'm programmed to do 3x5 this week, but I can only do it for 3x3, let's say, mentally I'm thinking, oh crap, I'm not going to get to where I need to be. Whereas if I can constantly change that and be fresh mentally and see that I'm hitting numbers, even if as the athlete I don't know that, you know what I mean? Because you've got it structured in a way that the session may look easier and I'll dominate it and then come in and be fresh in a structured sense. I think in the long run that's really, really important, and something that's often overlooked in programming because people just think, it's an accumulation week to week. But momentum to me in training is something that's often not spoken about.
That's the whole point of the way I do it, is to try and keep that momentum, and then less deloads. Sometimes deloads for people, they just wrecks them, you know what I mean? Even though it makes them fresh, but it wrecks them. Like some people can't cope with it, and sometimes like taking that week of deload, then sometimes that week back, they need another week to build momentum as well. So I like to just put like intra block deloads, but not deload like the whole time. Just pull certain days back, you know what I mean?
Where I had like, I'm like, oh, I've had 2 easy bench days, like, and then I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Let's look forward to the next week. What the hell's coming up?
They're the worst sessions.
Oh, shit.
The impending doom.
But so, like, and in within the training program too, I've set things for people. Like Lauren just hit what did you do? 3x3 PR in the squat. So it's like we did all these things, but eventually, like by the end of that block, I wanted to hit something. She'd hit like, what was your best triple? Like 170 or something? So 170, so I put it at 167 for 3 sets of 3. So mentally she looks at the number, it's not that bad. It's only 2.5 kilos less. I like chucking 2.5 kilos in because it fucks with people's heads. They don't get attached to the number as much as they do with a straight number like a 170, like stuff like that. So just pulled it under a bit, but I know if she could smoke that, she's a fuck ton stronger, and she did. Do you know what I mean? So it's like sometimes I have things like that, or like I said in the deadlift, where I'll have people then hit a deadlift for 3 sets of 2 on a weight that they've doubled or tripled before, but after they've already done another 12 sets of speed deadlifts or other variations of pulls before walking up to that, and then they're like, they're like, oh, that was sort of hard, and I'm like, yeah, but you've only ever pulled that weight fresh with like a single warm up, and then now you're doing it under fatigue. So then when we go into the next block, and then we start to pull that volume back a bit on that deadlift and let the deadlift shine a bit. It just things like that, and then each week, each fortnight, or however we're structuring it, I'm trying to just bring up the intensity slowly. So some weeks it might go down, but I might pull a bit away from the squat to push the deadlift a bit harder that week, and then vice versa. That's why I said it's a bit like Brandon Leely's cube method. Is sort of something I've taken away from that, is just pulling certain things away so that other workout could shine a bit, and then pulling that back and letting the other workout shine, and then it's just building that confidence and momentum through the training cycle.
And the only way I think you can do that, going back to something we said earlier, is having the metrics there. You know what I mean? Because I know a deload for you might be just taking accessory workout, like we said before, whereas just most people on the internet, a deload is not training for a week, or doing 3x5 at 50% or something like that. Whereas I don't see any of those weeks in your programs. Although I see bench sessions where, you know, there's the supplementary bench session that week is main bench work, and, you know, a couple of sets there, see you later, that's your session. You know what I mean? So you're building it in there, and ultimately, as we were talking about earlier, with you getting sick in training, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm taking deloads too frequently, I'm actually losing, over the course of a year, perhaps, you know, 5, 6, 10 weeks even of training, when I could be progressing in a structured way. You know what I mean? So it all comes back to the conversations we have are all coming around full fold. You know what I mean? Like, we need to understand where all of these things fit in the larger picture. And I think that's something we'll talk about into the future, in terms of how you have this concurrent system that has a block underpinning, but also has a progressive underpinning as well, because all those systems need to be there. And it's not just as simple as, you know, just chuck 2.5 kilos on every week. And I think that's something that we need to talk about in a whole episode in itself. You know what I mean? The phase potentiation, and how to progress training, and working back from certain goals and things like that.
Sweet. Well, that's
all right.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, good session.
I'm excited about all my PBs now.
Loz is pumped to train. She's going downstairs.
I'm so ready for Sydney Cup. No, I'm not stupid.
Okay.
I wouldn't go and lift now.
I wouldn't accuse you of being stupid.
No.
All right, mate. Thanks for coming on.
No worries, thank you.
Actually, just before we wrap up, on the point of being stupid, someone said to Shannon after his bench comp, "So you're going to go max out this week?" And he's like, nah. He saves his maxes for the comp. He's a smart man.
So just like Ed Cohen said on the it was on Elite FTS, they posted it this week, you only have so many max singles in you, and that's the way I approach the training program. I want people to hit those singles in competition, not in the gym, like we said last time. Like, save them for comp. If you hit it in the gym and you do it in the gym, but then you can't do it on the platform, you just wasted it.
Well, there was a girl at the Kern US Open this year, actually, and she missed her deadlift, her third attempt, and then she went out the back and pulled it.
And which is crazy. Like,
great.
I don't understand. Hey, do that. You should let it all hang out on the platform. But I mean, obviously, like cutting weight and stuff like that is a factor that plays into people missing those lifts. But if you've got the luxury of eating into a competition, you should be able to.
That'll be me at Sydney Cup. You guys be ready.
Then putting that into the comp. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.